Look at this photograph. Two sisters stand side by side. At first glance, they appear ordinary, innocent, almost sweet. Yet beneath the calm of this single image lies one of the most notorious cases in French history. The actions of these sisters were so shocking, so incomprehensible, that they forced a nation to reconsider its laws. Their names were Christine and Leah Papin. By the end of this story, you will understand why this photograph continues to haunt those who see it. To comprehend the events of that fateful night, we must first descend into the darkness that shaped them, those childhood that fractured their souls. Christine was born in 1905, Leah in 1911. Their upbringing was not merely difficult. It was a relentless sequence of neglect and suffering that carved the women they would become. Their father, Gustave Papin, was often absent for weeks at a time, and when he returned, his presence was no comfort. Neighbors spoke of ceaseless shouting, of arguments that rattled the walls. Their mother, Clemence, was a different kind of terror. She was not merely distant. She was cruel. Hours spent locked in pitch-dark rooms, harsh punishments, and constant words of worthlessness shaped the sisters from an early age. "No one will ever love you," she would tell them. By the age of 8, Christine had assumed the role of protector, almost a parent, to young Leah. She would sneak food to her sister, hold her close through the long, terrifying nights when the parents fought. This was the crucible in which their bond was forged, not merely as siblings, but as protector and protected. Christine became Leah's entire world, and Leah became Christine's reason to endure. At 15, Christine faced abandonment alongside 9-year-old Leah. Their parents left them to the harsh confines of a Catholic boarding school, where discipline was relentless. The nuns were determined to break their spirits. Floors were scrubbed until their hands throbbed. Nights were spent on hardboards, and even the smallest mistakes invited severe punishment. Yet the greatest threat came from attempts to separate them. Christine would weep and fight anyone who tried to remove Leah from her side. Eventually, the nuns conceded, labeling their bond unnatural and allowing them to remain together. It was the first lesson of their lives. The world was merciless, and they possessed nothing but each other. As shadows loomed in the world beyond the school, Christine resolved to protect Leah at all costs. At 18, she left the boarding school and entered service as a domestic worker. Every coin she earned went toward Leah's education. Every hardship endured to secure her sister's future. She lived in cramped quarters, ate leftovers, and bore the endless demands of the households she served, all for one purpose: to free Leah from the chains of that cruel institution. The wealthy treated their servants as though they were invisible. Christine had learned early how to endure scolding with a polite smile, to apologize for offenses she had not committed, to sacrifice her own dignity simply to survive. In 1926, when Leah reached 15, Christine finally gathered enough savings to bring her sister home. After 3 long years apart, they were reunited, yet both had changed. Christine had grown colder, suspicious of everyone except Leah. Leah, in turn, had become wholly dependent on her older sister, unable to navigate life without Christine's guidance. They soon found employment together in the Lancelin household, in the quiet town of Lama. For the first time, they dared to hope that stability might exist. They were wrong. For 6 years, Christine and Leah existed within the Lancelin mansion, like shadows. Their room was a tiny attic, scarcely large enough for the single bed it contained. From dawn until late at night, their work was relentless. Mr. Loss, a retired solicitor, spent most of his time at his club. Madame Yam, obsessed with appearances and reputation, offered them no warmth. Their daughter, Genevieve, 26, unmarried and deeply unhappy, added her own silent scrutiny. The sisters were never addressed by name. They were only "girl" or "you" there. Gratitude was unknown. Mistakes were unforgivable. The pressure was constant. Every corner of the house was inspected, every flaw punished. Madame Lam seemed to take pleasure in comparing the sisters, praising one, criticizing the other, sowing tension between them. In response, the sisters retreated into a world of their own making. They communicated in whispers, developed secret signals, and moved in perfect synchrony through the mansion. Neighbors later remarked on the unnatural closeness of the pair. They shared everything: clothes, thoughts, dreams, and a quiet resentment toward their employers began to take root. By the age of 27, Christine had spent nearly a decade in servitude, isolated and friendless. Leah, 21, had never known life beyond work. They felt trapped, and as with all confined creatures, suppressed emotions began to simmer dangerously beneath the surface. By early 1933, the warning signs were unmistakable. The sisters had isolated themselves completely, never taking days off, never attending church or social gatherings. Shopkeepers noticed their inseparable presence, always whispering, always enclosed in their private world. Dr. Verna, who occasionally treated servants, recalled Christine visiting him for headaches, sleeplessness, and intrusive thoughts. But in 1933, mental health was poorly understood. Sadness and anxiety were seen as weaknesses, not as conditions demanding care. The clearest warning came just 2 weeks before the tragedy. Marie, a servant from a neighboring house, recounted a question Christine had posed. What would you do if your employers treated you as though you were nothing? Marie had laughed and dismissed it. That is life for us, she said. Christine's quiet response left Marie uneasy. Yet, no one could foresee how soon life would change forever. The day everything shifted was February 2nd, 1933, Thursday that began as any other over the previous 6 years. By nightfall, it would be remembered as one of the most shocking days in French criminal history. The morning began quietly. Christine awoke at 5 a.m., gently shaking Leah. Together they dressed in silence, sharing the small mirror in their attic room. Then they descended into the house to begin the familiar rhythm of their daily labor. Christine managed the laundry and ironing, while Leah attended to cleaning and meal preparation. The house was unusually quiet. Monsieur Loss had departed early that morning. Madame Lam and Geneviève were preparing for a trip into town that afternoon. Everything appeared normal, yet there was a subtle change in Christine's demeanor. Leah sensed it immediately. Her sister was tense, distant, her thoughts elsewhere, concealed beneath a calm exterior. By 2 p.m., Christine was in the laundry room, carefully pressing an elaborate dress belonging to Geneviève. The iron was old and faulty, sparking intermittently for weeks. Yet no replacement had ever been provided. Then it happened. A spark, a flash, the acrid smell of burning wire. The iron failed entirely, cutting power to half the house. Across the delicate fabric of the dress appeared a large, dark scorch mark. To most, this would have seemed a mere accident. The dress could be replaced, the electricity restored, but Christine knew precisely what would follow. 6 years of experience had taught her the consequences of such a mistake. She stood in the dimly lit room, clutching the ruined garment, feeling a pressure swell inside her, a breaking point approaching. By 4 p.m., Madame Lam and Geneviève arrived. Their reaction was exactly as Christine had feared. She was scolded harshly in front of Leah, labeled careless, and threatened with deductions from their meager wages. Then came Genevieve's words, the spark that ignited everything. Look at them, 2 grown women who cannot even manage a simple iron, perhaps. We should find servants who actually know how to do their jobs. The thought of losing their positions, of being separated, of being cast into the world with nothing, struck the sisters like a shockwave. Christine felt years of frustration rising like a storm, 6 years of obedience, of silent suffering, of being treated as less than human. Leah, attuned to her sister in a near telepathic bond, realized that something irreversible was about to occur. The explosion came suddenly, violently, and with an intensity that even experts struggled to explain. One moment, Christine stood silently, head bowed under the scolding. The next, she snapped. With sudden ferocity, she lunged at Geneviève. This was no fleeting anger. It was 6 years of humiliation and pain finally erupting. Christine's first strike sent Geneviève staggering into the hallway. Madame Lam screamed and rushed to her daughter, but Leah moved swiftly to intercept her. The sisters operated with a strange, practiced precision. Christine advanced on Geneviève, while Leah confronted Madame Lam. The violence was shocking not merely for its force, but for its intimacy. This was not about theft or escape. It was the release of years of suppressed rage. They seized anything within reach, heavy household objects, kitchen tools, even their own hands. The confrontation was so intense that investigators later described it as resembling a storm sweeping through the house rather than a conventional crime. Experts would later suggest the attack was symbolic, a desperate reclamation of power from those who had rendered them powerless for so long. The struggle lasted less than 30 minutes. When it concluded, the house was silent. The hallway bore the scars of a fierce confrontation, a scene that shocked even seasoned police officers. Perhaps the most disturbing detail was what followed. The sisters cleaned themselves, changed into fresh clothes, and tidied their small attic room. Then they lay down side by side as though the day had been no different from any other. There was no attempt to flee, no panic, only an eerie, unsettling calm. When later asked why they had not run, Christine's reply was chillingly simple. Where would we go? They had nowhere else. For years, they had been told they were nothing, that they did not belong. Even in that moment, that belief remained, ingrained deep within them. The discovery occurred around 6 matin, monsieur. Llewellyn returned home to find the house, dark and unnervingly silent. He called for his wife and daughter. No answer. The door was locked from the inside, an unusual occurrence when anyone was home. Concerned, he sought help from his neighbor, Monsieur Rousseau. Together, they climbed a ladder to a second-floor window. What they saw inside was horrifying. Police were summoned immediately, yet even seasoned officers were shaken by the scene. Detective Henry Bousset would later write that nothing he had witnessed could compare. At first, the sisters were found lying peacefully in their bed. Many assumed they were victims who had somehow survived. But the small traces of blood on Christine's hands revealed the terrible truth. Did you kill Madame Llewellyn and her daughter? Detective Bousset asked. Yes, Christine replied without hesitation. They were cruel to us, and that was it. There was no lengthy explanation, no dramatic plea, no visible remorse. When pressed for details, She repeated, "They treated us badly, so we fought back." Leia spoke even less. When asked if she regretted what had happened, she seemed genuinely puzzled. "Regret?" she asked softly. "Why would we regret it?" A police psychiatrist noted that both sisters appeared oddly detached from the reality of their actions. They spoke of the events calmly, almost as though describing routine household chores. There was no recognition of wrongdoing. Dr. Rouge later wrote that it was as if they could not comprehend why the world was so shocked. 6 months later, the trial began, and it immediately became a national obsession. Newspapers labeled it the crime of the century. Reporters crowded the courtroom, eager to witness the women behind such an unthinkable act. What shocked observers most was the sisters' ordinary appearance. Dressed in simple black dresses, hair neatly combed, sitting side by side. They could have been any family's daughters. Prosecutor Maître Chenier struggled to convey the gravity of the crime to the jury, facing two women who appeared almost meek. "These women," he declared, "have committed an act that forces us to question what human beings are capable of." The defense presented a different story. Maitre argued that these were young women shaped by a lifetime of mistreatment, abandonment, and humiliation. "They are not evil," he said. "They are profoundly damaged." Psychiatrists studied the sisters for weeks. Dr. Leon Janilpan, a leading expert, concluded that Christine and Leia had constructed a private world of their own. In their minds, he explained, the act was not murder, it was survival, a calculated strike against those they believed had wronged them. Christine herself delivered the most chilling testimony. Asked to describe the events, she spoke with a calm, emotionless voice. "They told us we were worthless. We showed them we were not." When the prosecutor asked if she felt remorse for taking 2 lives, Christine's response was haunting. "Innocent? They were not innocent. They made us feel like nothing." After 3 days, the jury returned its verdict. Christine, regarded as the leader, was sentenced to death. Leia, considered under her sister's influence, received 10 years of hard labor. The courtroom erupted. Some cheered, others wept. But the most dramatic moment came from the sisters themselves. When they realized they would be separated, Christine began calling her sister's name over and over. Leia collapsed, sobbing, and had to be carried from the room. For the first time since their arrest, the 2 sisters displayed deep emotion, reaching for one another as guards pulled them. The final breakdown came in prison. For the first time in her life, Christine was separated from Leia. Her mental state collapsed. She refused to eat, convinced that the guards intended to harm her. Frail, restless, withdrawn, Christine became a shadow of herself. Most unsettling were her conversations with Leia, which guards soon realized were entirely one-sided. Hours were spent speaking softly to the empty cell, as though her sister were still present. "Do not worry, Leia," she whispered. "I will protect you. I will always protect you." Prison psychiatrist Dr. Rouge documented Christine's rapid decline. She had constructed a private world where Leia remained with her. She left half of her food untouched for her sister, made space on her bed, and spoke for hours alone. It became painfully clear Christine could not exist without Leia. Their bond, so intense and consuming, was tearing her apart. Her death sentence was later commuted to life imprisonment, yet it came too late. Christine died in her cell on May 18, 1937, just 4 years later. Officially, the cause was exhaustion. Those who knew her believed she could not bear the separation. Her last words, according to the prison chaplain, were, "Tell Leia I'm waiting for her." Leia's lonely life began thereafter. She served her full sentence and was released in 1943, aged 32. Completely alone for the first time in her life, she changed her name to Marie and took work as a chambermaid in a small hotel in Nantes. For nearly 6 decades, she lived quietly, never marrying, never having children. Hotel guests described her as polite and diligent, yet distant. Neighbors noted her unusual habits, setting the table for 2, speaking softly, as if someone else were present, keeping duplicates of items, 2 pillows, 2 nightgowns, 2 toothbrushes. She lived as though Christine had never left. Even decades after Christine's death, Leia passed away in 2001, aged 90. She was found lying peacefully in bed, 2 pillows at her side. Almost 70 years had passed, yet she had never truly left that attic room in her mind. Some bonds, it seems, are stronger than time itself, impossible to sever. The legacy of the Papin sisters changed France forever. Society was forced to confront questions of class, power, and the treatment of domestic workers. Labor laws were eventually reformed. Working conditions improved, and the idea that employers could treat their staff as less than human was finally challenged. Yet the most unsettling lesson remains human nature itself. Under relentless pressure, anyone can reach a breaking point. Christine and Leia were not born killers. They were forged by years of neglect, abuse, and a world that rendered them invisible. Their story inspired books, plays, and films. Jean-Paul Sartre viewed them as symbols of the oppressed striking back. Jean Genet based his play, The Maids, on their tale. But beyond art and philosophy, this is tragedy. 2 young women so damaged by life that they lost their way entirely. Let us return to that photograph. Two sisters side by side, calm and ordinary. Taken in 1932, just months before everything changed. Look closely. Christine's hand rests protectively on Leia's shoulder. They stand slightly too close, their expressions distant, as if seeing something no one else could. The signs were there, the isolation, the dependence, the quiet resentment, but no one noticed. Everyone who knew them said the same afterward. They seemed quiet, ordinary, harmless, and that is what makes this story haunting. Danger does not always announce itself. Sometimes it hides behind the most ordinary faces. Nearly a century later, the case still leaves us with questions we cannot answer. What transforms someone into a killer? Is it innate, or is it created by life itself? Could this tragedy have been prevented with kindness or understanding? And perhaps the most chilling thought, how many people today are living on the edge, one small step from their own breaking point? The next time you gaze at an old photograph, consider the stories behind the calm faces, the unseen pain, the hidden fury. The case of Christine and Leia, Papin reminds us that we never truly know what another person has endured or what they might be capable of. That photograph is more than an image, it is a warning. Normalcy can mask a storm beneath the surface. Look at Christine and Leia one final time. Two sisters who seemed ordinary, harmless, quiet. Remember their faces, remember their story. And remember this, sometimes the most frightening monsters are the ones who look just like us.